Well, friends, welcome to this 39th session of Art Matters. 39, that's not a small number. Welcome on behalf of the Raza Foundation and the India International Center. We have this evening a conversation with the well-known vocalist SHUBHA MUDGAL and the well-known art critic, music lover, once upon a time also a musician, KALIDAS. We are grateful to all of you to have come. We are expecting a larger number, but anyway, people have all kinds of other temptations. May I ask you, please? SHUBHA MUDGAL is somebody who is very well known in the classical music circles, also in Delhi. She had learned from Vinay Chandra Moudgal, Pandit Vasant Thakar, Pandit Jitendra Vishekhi, Pandit Kumar Gandharv, also from Naina Devi. So she had a very rich lineage in terms of mentors and teachers. And she is one of those who have, while firmly rooted in the classical, have dared to meander into arousing some controversy into other areas. And we shall be perhaps talking about it presently, so you will learn more about it. And she has taught, she's professor for a visiting professor at Goa University. Well, I'm also a visiting professor, although I have not visited the damn university in 3 years, but I hope they have cut me out now. Anyway, so there you are, a very well-known vocalist and a thinking vocalist. You know, there are not many musicians whom one can talk to. They'll say, Guru ki mahima hai, Allah ka karam hai, buzurgon ka diya hua hai, and that's about all. And you can't have a dialogue, very few of them. So we have SHUBHA MUDGAL, we are very grateful. And then you have KALIDAS, who at one time worked with us in Bharat Bhavan. That's not the best thing that he had done, although perhaps it was not all that bad either. He was a trained musician with star Amjad Ali Khan and the great vocalist Pandit Mallikarjun Mansoor. But then he meandered into writing and he became associated with the Arts Editor of India Today and done a lot of archival work for us in Bharat Bhavan, including a wonderful archival recording, specially done of Mallikarjun Mansoor, by going there, all the way, and things of that kind. So there, KALIDAS, who knows music from inside, and also knows the wider world of the arts. The fact that he is also the son of my old friend and mentor, Jagdish Swaminathan, also adds to his lineage. So here you have two persons who in all their different ways have very strong, rich, perhaps provocative lineage. So there you are. They will be talking. The rules of the game, as you know, are simple. They'll be talking as long as they want to, and hopefully for about 45 minutes to an hour. And then there will be 15 to 20 minutes of question answer from the audience. The idea of this series of conversation is to make us know the artists better. Their inner life, their struggles, their training, their memories, their experiences, their disappointments. Although nobody in this age talks of failure, because it's such a successful age, that even of failures, if one dare mention them. So there you are, Shubha Mudgal with Kalidas.
It gives me, and I'm sure Shubha too, immense pleasure to be here. नहीं, मेरी आवाज काफी बुलंद है वैसे।
धीरे धीरे बढ़ती है।
ये तो तमीज का तकाजा है। और we'll be conducting this conversation both in English and in Hindi because talking about classical music in English is difficult. And I'm especially both honored and somewhat daunted by the audience we have. We have Rita Ji sitting right in front, and Ashish Da, and so many of you friends. And as this platform is that of the Raza Foundation, and as we all know, Sayyid Haidar Raza was one of the most preeminent modernist painters of our time, a senior colleague of my father's, and also one who addressed the question of modernity in indigenous terms. So as I was coming here, I was thinking, can classical music be modern? And this question actually bothers a lot of us, especially of the generation that Shubha and I belong to. And Shubha especially is one who has engaged with this question with the vocabulary of classicism. And as a tribute to that, I would like to begin with a small 2.5-minute video that I edited of her music set to one of our very well-known contemporary artists, Subodh Gupta. So I thought that this marriage of Shubha's voice to Subodh Gupta's sculpture would be an interesting note to begin with, especially in the context of the Raza Foundation. And I hope you'll bear with us, and I hope Shubha approves of it. She has not seen it as yet. So that was SHUBHA MUDGAL and Subodh Gupta juxtaposed vis-a-vis each other. What did you think of it, SHUBHA?
Thank you for doing that, because I'm a great fan of Subodh Gupta's work. I only wish you had called me in. I would have sung to it, actually.
SHUBHA, your parents were teachers of literature in Allahabad. And how does that impact, or how did it impact with your musical proclivities or training?
My parents were teachers of English literature at the Allahabad University, but they were also crazy about music. And when I say crazy, it was, I mean, when I recount tales of how they would go to listen to concerts, not just in Allahabad, but in nearby Banaras, even into Maihar, they would suddenly come back from class on a weekend and say, jaldi karo, we are leaving. And we would suddenly find ourselves hustled into a train compartment and leaving for Riva to stay at a friend's house and then go to Maihar to listen to the big conference there. Or very often my parents, we would come back from school and find that my parents weren't home from the university. And my grandmother would say, अरे वो दोनों तो चले गए स्कूटर पे बनारस, आज रविशंकर जी वहाँ बजा रहे हैं, उनको सुनने चले गए. So driving 80 kilometers on a Vespa scooter or a Lambretta scooter, all the way to listen to a concert, I think that was the kind of junoon, that they had for music. And of course, they were deeply engrossed in literature. They were students of literature, and I saw them studying, researching, making notes all the time, ever eager to learn more about literature from other parts of the world. But also a large part of their lives was really wrapped up in listening to music and discussing music. Very often fierce arguments would break out at the dinner table over the musical preferences of various family members. Nevertheless, the conversation was always open and everybody was free to voice their opinions.
I must mention here that SHUBHA's father was also one of the most preeminent commentators of cricket.
Yes, that was another passion of his. And he taught in English, but he always, when he was a commentator, it was Hindi commentary that he did on radio.
And you yourself have been very sensitive to Hindi poetry, to contemporary Hindi poetry at that, and also Urdu poetry.
Yes.
And in fact, she has sung modern Hindi poets and Urdu poets, including Faiz. And in fact, quite a significant genre of Faiz, in fact. And will you tell us about your encounter with Faiz?
Well, I think it was the early 80s when Faiz Saab came to Allahabad. And my father was a great bhakt of Faiz Saab. And he informed my sister Ragini and me that this was going to be a life-changing experience for us to actually be able to witness Faiz Saab speaking and reciting his poetry. And he said, I don't want any excuses of any kind. I don't care if you have a test the next morning. I don't care if you have any other exam, but this you must attend. There can be no excusing you on this score. And actually, there was really no need for us to cook up any excuses, because the entire city itself was agog and abuzz with the news that Faiz Saab is coming. And I recall Faiz Saab, Mahadevi ji and Firaq Saab addressing a huge crowd at the university. But the experience that Kalidas wants me to talk about is, there were many civic receptions, there were many public receptions for Faiz Sahab, and one of them was being conducted at the Hindustani Academy in Allahabad, which is a very tiny, hall, sort of like a elongated train wagon, where just very little space. At that point of time it was very shabby, but a lot of concerts, a lot of events would take place there, and one of the receptions was organized at the Hindustani Academy. In the afternoon, before that reception, the doorbell rang at our house, and I opened the door to find Pandit Ramashray Jhaji, from whom I learned for more than 30 years. Guruji was standing there, and he said, "Hey, chalo, bas, jaise ho chalo, chalo." And there was no explanation ki kahan jana hai. And Guruji used to drive this moped. I know I was many tons, I weighed less at that point of time. But I was asked with a flick of the finger to perch on the pillion of that moped. And off went Guruji down the streets of Allahabad with me perched on the pillion, saying, "अरे भाई, वो जिस लड़की को तैयार किया था फैज की गजल गाने के लिए, वो आई नहीं है, गला वाला कुछ खराब हो गया, तो तुमको गाना होगा." But I was terrified. अरे तुम्हारे पिताजी तो इतने भक्त थे, उनके याद तो होंगे तुमको उनकी चीजें, तो वो जरा गा देना, वो शामे फिराक वो गा देना, तरन्नुम में जैसे गाते ना वैसे गा देना, हम बता देंगे तुमको। अरे Now I said, पर मुझे वो, अरे लिख लेना ना, वहाँ पे इतने लोग हैं, सबको याद होगी. Before we knew it, we were at Hindustani Academy, and on a table there was a harmonium on one side, which Guruji played. He said, जैसे तरन्नुम में गाते हैं वैसे गा देना. Before I could even rehearse it and write down the ghazal in Devanagari, because I didn't know Urdu script, we see Faiz Sahab escorted by several people and a rush of people just entering the hall. And chalo, chalo. And quavering away, terrified, I sang that. And Faiz Sahab was sort of, would have been there near the podium, and Faiz Sahab was right here. He said, "Arey bitiya zara idhar aana, ye kya hai tumhare haath mein?" And that was a crumpled page that I had torn out of an exercise book on which I had written the entire ghazal in Devanagari. And I was trying hard to camouflage it, but he said, "Kya hai tumhare haath mein?" So I had no other option but to show it to him. I said, देवनागरी में उर्दू नहीं आती? जी नहीं, अभी सीखी नहीं है. तलफ़्फ़ुज़ तो ठीक था तुम्हारा, लाओ. And he signed his name on that piece of paper and gave it back to me. And when I recounted this wonderful anecdote to my husband Anish, he said, "You're a good storyteller." And that's it. He refused to believe that I could have received this bounty from Faiz Sahab. So गुरुजी ने ऐसे कहा था, अरे जैसे तरन्नुम में गाते हैं, लो सालो शामे फिराक अब न पूछ, आई और आके टल गई, दिल था के फिर बहल गया, जां थी के फिर संभल गई.
फैज का एक किस्सा मेरे साथ भी हुआ. I was returning from Hindu College in the university one day and got off at Connaught Place, where there used to be this old coffee house where everybody all the writers, intellectuals used to gather. It was around 4:35 in the evening. And Faiz Sahab was sitting alone on a table. He must be waiting for somebody to join in. So I recognized him and I walked up to him. And he said, "आप फैज अहमद फैज हैं?" जी. मैंने अपनी कॉपी निकाली और मैंने कहा, "कुछ लिख दीजिए." And he obliged. I still have that piece of paper on which he wrote a share and signed. So Faiz Sahab was very generous, and he was very part of all of us in Delhi. The point that I'm trying to make is that Faiz was a subcontinental icon. Absolutely. But to return back to music, ये आपने बिल्कुल ठीक फरमाया कि आपके पहले और सबसे लंबे अरसा जिन्होंने आपको सिखाया वो रामाश्रय झा था.
बिल्कुल, बहुत
So, and Ramashra Jha is perhaps, was, because he died a few years ago, was a relatively unsung, but all musicians knew him and of him. And a great teacher and a great composer. Tell us something about Jha Sahib.
So you see, the opportunity to learn from Jhaji came because he was actually a colleague of my parents. He was teaching in the music department of the Allahabad University, and that's why my parents, when I expressed a desire to learn music, actually it was one of his students who suggested that I should be taken to him. I grew up, I know I'm making all these confessions and all of you must be thinking of, ये dance करती होगी तो क्या होता होगा, ज़लज़ला आता होगा. But I promise I weighed a lot less at that point of time. But from the age of 4, I started learning Kathak. And then after learning Kathak for several years, my mother suggested that you should train in music, because a dancer who doesn't understand music is sort of handicapped. You should learn music. And it was because of that I sort of started taking formal lessons in music at the unconventionally sort of late age of about 17 years. Earlier than that, I had actually learned dance. And at that point, there used to be intermediate college, which was a kind of a bridge year between school and university. And I was studying at the St. Mary's Convent, where during my intermediate college, when I was taking admission in college, Sister Eugenia, one of the nuns who taught there, called my father and said, we've just engaged a very, very good Hindustani classical music teacher, and I think Shubha should join that class. And my father had this very cynical smile on his face, and he said, that's hard work, she's not up to it. And Sister Eugenia said, no, nothing of the sort. What we can do is we can have a trial period of 1 month. And if she can't cope, then we'll allow her to change the subject. And so it was Kamladi, who was one of Jhaji's senior disciples, who started teaching me during that intermediate year in college. And she suggested to my parents within that month that they should take me to Guruji. And when they asked whether he would accept me as a disciple, he said, "Sikha hai?" They said, "नहीं, सीखा तो नहीं, सुना है थोड़ा बहुत." He said, "हमसे अभी बहुत लोग आते हैं सीखने के लिए, सारे गामा हम नहीं करा सकते, थोड़ा सीख ले फिर आ जाए." So that was it. I was told that you better shape up and then go to him. But that very year, a year later, I applied for admission to BA in Allahabad University, and we had a freshers talent contest. And with the swagger that comes very often with either ignorance or youthfulness, I had both. I swaggered onto stage for the freshers talent contest, thinking I would conquer all. And in the judge's seat was Jhaji, and I froze completely. I opened my mouth, there was very little sound, and I sang a bhajan in Tilang, which Kamladi had taught to me. But next morning, Jhaji came home and said, देखिए हम किसी घर जाके नहीं सिखाते हैं, लेकिन संडे को अगर आप इसको घर पे ले आएं तो हम सिखाना शुरू कर देंगे. But it was really मुझे तो लगा कि अब क्या करें, मुझे तैयार किया था, उसमें कुछ कॉर्ड स्ट्रक्चर्स भी थे, वो कहीं से सीखा विखा था और कमलादी ने ठीक करा दिया था. लेकिन मैं क्या बताऊं, उस दिन जो दहशत मुझे हुई है उन्हें देख के वहाँ पे. But that's how my talim started with him, and I would go, my father or my mother would take me to his house every Sunday. Very often we would reach 5 minutes later than somebody else, which meant that an hour and a half to 2 hours. We would wait or very often be sent back also if there were 2 people. Because, I was allowed to listen to the talim of others, but obviously if he has sung for 4 hours, he's not going to teach me. And so that's how the talim started.
अभी सुनेंगे, बीच में और भी pieces हैं.
भूमिका नहीं है.
नहीं तो when did you decide that अब नाचना बहुत हुआ, अब म्यूजिक ही होना है?
ऐसा हुआ कि जब गाना सीखना शुरू किया तो बहुत सारी ऐसी चीज़ें थी जो ज़्यादातर बच्चों को 5-6 साल की उम्र में उनको वो तालीम मिल जाती है, मुझे वो नहीं मिली थी। तो बहुत सारी चीज़ें मतलब मुझे 16-17 साल की उम्र में सीखने को मिली जो बच्चे सीख लेते हैं 5-6 साल की उम्र में। और फिर I really feel my parents had a very important role in my coming to this decision that I want to make a commitment to music, a full-time commitment to music. So my mother suggested to me that I should take a year off after I graduated. And she said, look, now you have been learning from a very, very eminent guru. But there are many things which you have to practice, there are many things which you have to learn anew. And you need to make a full-time commitment to music if you want to go any further. It can no longer remain a serious hobby. So I think you need to take a year off and give yourself time to think of whether or not you want to take up music full-time. And once you do that, please don't give me any complaints about, I'm not getting enough time with Guruji. Please be prepared for everything. And we are there to support you, but this decision must be yours, an independent decision. And I think that was so many years ago, so many decades ago. What a fantastic option to give to a young woman. I think this was really, this really changed everything for me. And I did not take a year. I took about a month to say to my mother that this is what I want to do and this is what I would like to do. And that's how it all sort of, started even more seriously.
And then after a few years you came to Delhi.
Yes.
And tell us about that. You joined Rangaram Vidyalaya, Bhaiji was there.
Yes.
And you became a student of Bhaiji and Thakarji. Tell us about those days.
So again, my mother said after I had spent about 5 or 6 years learning from Jhaji, she felt that I was in a small university town where people really knew me from the time that I was born. And there was a kind of an indulgent, affectionate view that most people had for me. Apni bachchi hai. And they were inclined to be rather kind to me. And she felt that I really did not know my own merit or my own weaknesses in the world of music. She told me there are so many people like you. And here everybody is saying, oh, Jayaskant ki beti, Jayaskant ki beti, Guruji ki, Jhaji ki shagird, shishya. So there is a certain kindness and indulgence with which people treat you. But that's not what's going to get you anywhere. You have to go and see where you actually stand for yourself. And you go to Maharashtra, you will find the most beautiful voices. People younger than you will outsing you any day. You go to Bengal, there will be such beautiful voices. What are you sort of feeling so sure about? And you need to leave Allahabad and you need to see for yourself where you stand. And so the options that actually were sort of presented themselves were whether I should go to Bombay or to Delhi or to Calcutta. And my mother felt that since I was North Indian, I was born and brought up in Allahabad, perhaps it would be easier for me to leave home and be in Delhi. And she had, in her student days when she was studying, she had done a course in library science in Delhi. And she had attended the Gandharma Vidyalaya Vishnu Digambar Jayanti concerts and met Bhaiji. And she said, he's a wonderful person and he really used to take care of young people who came to listen to the concerts, or arranged for buses for them to go back if it was late at night, or tried to find people who would help take them back. I think he would be a good person to speak to. And that's how we approached Bhaiji, who made us another fantastic offer. I finally married his son. Unfortunately, the marriage did not last, but see what a generous person he was. And I started also learning from him. And, one of the things that I want to share about Bhaiji, when you have a great teacher, and I learned from many great teachers, you feel a sense of awe when you hear them sing or speak about music, and you do feel intimidated. If there was one person who made you feel confident that you could do what perhaps you never even knew you could do, it was Bhaiji.
That's true. Bhaiji created in Delhi a world of music that I think our generation will be eternally grateful to him about. I mean, even today, of course, MUDGAL is running as perhaps even with bigger numbers and force than when he was here. But those years, I remember from, in fact, perhaps even before you came to Delhi, from mid-60s till 80s, when, and Bhaiji was definitely across gharanas, across, you know, all kinds of boundaries. Tell us about that, the atmosphere in Vidyalaya, for example. And that led to your learning from many other people.
Yes. In fact, it was the first time, you know, in Allahabad, I listened to a lot of music, and there were sort of a few groups that invited artists every year. There were also people who had close ties in Allahabad with artists like Kumar Gandharv. And so every year we were treated to at least one concert of Kumarji at the Verma household. And similarly, there were other people who had close associations with Pandit Jasraj and others. So I had heard all of these great musicians and at close quarters, but at the Vidyalaya, suddenly it was a conservatory-like atmosphere, where one day KG Gindeji would come and do a workshop only on Bilawal. Another day Athavleji would come, V.R. Athavle, and he would do a workshop only on Malhars. Other days there would be, you know, a musician from Korea coming to learn Indian music, who would then do a lecture on Korean music. So there was the opportunity to listen to a lot of music which I had not been able to listen to in Allahabad, and of course also participate and learn from all these wonderful people. So from Gindeji I have received compositions, from Athavleji I have received compositions, Raja Bhau Kokje has given me Tumri compositions, and so it was really quite a vibrant atmosphere. And at the same time, I was not learning in the way in which I was learning in Allahabad. There, I was the only student for, when I had my talim session, it was only me with Jhaji, and perhaps other people listened, and then perhaps there was a tabla player to provide theka. But it was a more sina basina talim. Here, I was often learning while a class was also going on. Nevertheless, I really got a chance to listen to many people, and Bhaiji himself was generous beyond any description that I can give. As many of you would know, he worked many hours in the day, and yet at the end of the day, if I told him that मुझे शुद्ध सारंग क्या गा रही थी, शुद्ध सारंग गा रही थी, अच्छा चल 2 बंदिश और ले ले, and after a full day's work to go back again to tune the tanpuras and to sit down with me, and with no sense of, you know, oh God, you know, not again, never a sense of feeling tired or fatigued or just bored with teaching. I think that was really one of his great gifts to his many students, including me.
That brings me to the question of style. You know, usually when we were growing up, the gharana was a very big, you know, entity, and one was expected to sing or play in the style of one's master. One could never be the master, but nonetheless one was expected to adhere to. But amongst many of my contemporaries, you are one person who has emerged as a voice which is her own. You know, I mean, you could have sung in the style of Kumarji, you could have sung in the style of Jasraj, or continued even with Jhaji's style, although it's difficult to categorize Jhaji as a for example, what impressed me about Jhaji's singing was his attitude to tal, which was very Agra driven, if I could use the phrase. And so, how did this come about? That did you not consciously feel obliged to sing in a particular style or mode, or did your teachers not sort of pressurize you towards that, or just because you were learning from so many people at a time, ensured that you could find your own voice and use them only as raw material rather than, you know, subjects of imitation?
That's a very complex question, and I'll try and answer that but I'd like to remind you that each one of the people whom I learned from really themselves had this very eclectic approach to music. So Haji himself was fond of saying, हमने 72 गुरु से सीखा है. And that didn't mean that 72 गुरु से सीखा है, but that he was able to acquire knowledge from various sources. And each one of them was very generous. So I never learned from all of them at the same time. It was at different times in my life that I went to each of them. And I went with ijazat from each one of them. So it wasn't sort of a guru hopping situation where I just went from one class to the other to either get a whole treasure house of Bandish compositions. Neither was I, in fact, I would say that it's the generosity of each of these people that really helped me to go to each one of them. And I'd like to share 2 anecdotes in this regard. You know, Bhaiji never sang Thumri. And he was not particularly fond of Thumri. And yet I really wanted to learn Thumri, and Jhaji had taught me some Thumris. But he would teach me Thumri at times. I really wanted to learn more. And I kept mentioning to Bhaiji that I want to learn Thumri, I want to learn Thumri. And he would say, हाँ, देखेंगे, well, kar. But finally, when I was persistent, he realized that this is really something I want to do. And he said, अच्छा ठीक है, चल मैं नैना देवी जी को फ़ोन करता हूँ. अगर वो राज़ी हो जाएंगी तो मैं लेके जाऊँगा. And he called Naina ji and she said yes. And in my first talim session, Bhaiji went with me. And I remember that incident vividly, that Naina ji had this very elegant drawing room on which there was a takhat, on which she sat with a harmonium. I sat on the floor in front of her, and behind her was this big armchair in which Bhaiji sat. And she started my talim in Thumri with the Dadra and Bhairavi. And then she started teaching me how to introduce Sher and Doha into that. And I was wondering, what Bhaiji thinks of this. And I was feeling a bit self-conscious, and wondering, oh my God, not only does he not like Thumri Dadra, now I'm learning how to introduce couplets into this. And so I tried to, steal a look behind me very carefully, wondering if he's doing. And I couldn't be more delighted at what I saw. After a day's hard work, he was fast asleep. But how generous that he took me for this first talim session. And I'd also like to mention that when I first went to Abhishek ji's place in Pune, he started teaching me Bilawal. And he had a very soft speaking voice. He did not take on many female students. And he looked very taciturn and somebody who doesn't like to talk at all. But he was very disciplined about his teaching and practice. And there I was in Pune, surrounded by a lot of male students, and Abhishek ji being kind enough to sing in my sur. And then he says to me, "Aap Bilawal mein kya gaati hain? Aap Bilawal mein kya gaati hain?" So I said, I tried to sort of give some answer. Said, "Kavan Batariya gaati hain?" "Kisse सीखा?" "कुमार जी से सीखा." "गाइए." Then he asked me, "और क्या गाती हैं?" I said, "झा जी की बंदिश ये है." Said, "ये जरा मुझे लिखवा दीजिए." Now in my first lesson, Abhishek ji is asking me to give him this composition. I mean, this is what I have sort of inherited from these great people. I've been very fortunate. And yes, there were moments of tension. Let me be very truthful. There were moments of tension when perhaps one was disapproving of the other's method of teaching. And yet I was given the freedom, or maybe I was just plain disobedient and went ahead and did what I wanted. But years after I had stopped going regularly to Jhaji, I sang a radio Sangeet Sammelan in which I sang Yaman. Jhaji used to write letters to people, handwritten letters, and I received a registered post letter from him. यद्यपि आपने बहुत जगहों से सीखा है, हमें ये खुशी है कि हमने जिस पद्धति में आपको सिखाया था वो आज भी आपको याद है और वो आपके गायन में दिखती है, सुनाई देती है. So I think the greatest impact on my music making was that of Jhaji's.
Shubha just mentioned her interaction with Naina Devi ji. And I remember Naina Devi ji mentioning to me about Shubha. And this is what she said. She said, मैंने उस लड़की से कहा कि तुम ठुमरी अच्छा गाओगी. तो उसने क्या जवाब दिया? उसने कहा, नैना जी मैं जो भी गाऊंगी अच्छा गाऊंगी.
No, Kali, I couldn't have been so cheeky. I can't.
This is what she said. He said, उसका confidence देखो. वो कहती है मैं जो गाऊंगी अच्छा. But again, Naina ji, like Bhai ji, was one of those persons in Delhi who created this incredible mahal. She didn't have an institution. I mean, she did have a society which she ran, but her drawing room was the institution in which we all grew up.
Yes.
You know, I mean, absolutely. It was the house where Vilayat Khan and Amir Khan, you know, got together after years of not talking to each other. It was a house where we heard many professional women singers and also old Khan Saabs who perhaps would not get concerts, but Naina ji's house was a platform that that we all came to. When you retrospect, what do you remember of Naina ji?
I mean, I'm sort of at the whole lot of memories, but you know, one thing about her that I'd like to mention was that among the many people I learned from, she was the only lady I learned from. And the way she was able to make, I was part of the extended family of each of the gurus. And yet, with Naina ji, I had a certain comfort level, which really perhaps made me feel I was part of her extended family. And she too, you know, maintained a very informal, I mean, I couldn't call up Jhaji and tell him that I've, you know, read this beautiful poem. I mean, to his last day, Anish would always make fun of me and say that I turn into this large mouse when Jhaji arrives at our house, because I was so much in awe of him. But I could never ever call him and say, ये कविता मैंने पढ़ी है या ये पद पढ़ा है मैंने, इसकी तर्ज बना दीजिए. Naina ji, on the other hand, allowed a certain informality, and she, I think, permitted that with many of her students. So she would call me suddenly, quite late at night, and say, कुछ याद आ गया है मुझे, 3 कजरियाँ याद आ गई हैं मुझे, लिख लो जल्दी से, फिर कल जब तालीम के लिए आना मैं तुम्हें सिखा दूँगी. And so, I mean, normally to get 3 compositions in one talim session, but if Naina ji remembered, she would give them. And very often she would even talk about various aspects of presentation, which I think she herself was very fond of. But for example, what are you going to wear during a concert, and why ये season है, इसमें ये रंग चलता है, चलो तुम्हें मैं पुरानी दिल्ली ले जाके तुम्हें इत्र खरीदवाती हूँ, और कौन से सीजन में कौन सा इत्र यूज करना चाहिए, क्या किस रंग की साड़ी पहननी चाहिए, क्या गाना चाहिए. I think all these things were of great interest to her, and she shared that with all her students, including me, and those are really precious memories.
I asked Shubha to select 3 pieces around which we could talk this evening, and she has very kindly brought those. And there is Kesarbai, there is Siddheshwari Devi, and of course her own, one piece of her own singing. And I would like to play each of them, and then maybe we could talk around them. And also, एक minute. Perhaps we should begin with Kesarbai.
If you're playing Kesarbai and Siddheshwari ji, then don't play my piece at all.
नहीं, सबकी अपनी जगह है.
But उनके बाद नहीं, इतनी हिम्मत नहीं रही.
तो पहले शुभा से तो
I'll tell you which one. ये बंदिश मैंने बांधी है, शब्द पुराने हैं, ब्रजनिधि ग्रंथावली में से हैं, और ये मैंने कई ऐसी चीज़ें अलग अलग बंदिशें बांधी हैं, ठुमरी दादरा के अंदाज में भी, ख्याल में भी, और कुछ जो कि मुझे नहीं लगता कि ना तो ख्याल में फिट होंगी, ना भजन, कन्वेंशनल भजन में उन्हें शामिल किया जा सकता है, लेकिन साहित्य पुराना है और उसको बांधना, मुझे वो कोशिश, it really engages me and I feel quite compelled to do that, and I greatly enjoy it. And yes, I don't make, I mean, at times I feel there is no need to announce that this is mine, because neither is it really all mine, and at the same time I could, I did find, I made the selection and I did put it to a melodic composition. जी, तो वो मैंने वो कोशिश काफ़ी 15 साल से जारी है.
ब्यूटीफुल, बिकॉज मैं एक चीज़ बोलूँ, और ये सबको शायद ठीक ना लगे. आई थिंक पिछले 50-60 सालों में हिंदुस्तानी म्यूजिशियंस का सबसे ज़्यादा एंगेजमेंट, और मेरे को लगता है उनका सबसे ज़्यादा वीक पॉइंट भी ये रहा है कि अपनी बंदिशें बांधो. राग और ताल तो हो जाता है, पर वो जो साहित्य लेके अपने शब्द बांधते हैं उसमें, वो पारंपरिक शब्दावली से कोई ज़्यादा भिन्न भी नहीं होते, और उनकी एक फीकी परछाई रह जाती है. और इसमें मैं कहूँगा शुभा का साहित्य के साथ, she not only researches old texts. In fact, she gets very excited by them. I mean, even if we meet, just casually over lunch or dinner or something, she would always say, "Arey kali maine ye padha," and she gets excited by good literature, by good poetry, and she doesn't perhaps feel compelled to use her own words to her own tunes, which I think is which makes, I mean, for example, this could have been an old dadra, but I feel that a lot of great musicians have wasted a lot of time in trying to compose in very pedestrian Hindi.
Unless I can find my own voice for the lyrics also. I mean, if I have something else to say about Holi, for example, and I can say it in Khadi Boli, in Bolchal ki bhasha, then I should try it. But I have not been successful in doing that. I have tried, but it has not been successful, and I don't find the kind of lyrical quality, I don't find the ease of elaboration in what I have written, and I keep trying again and again, hoping that someday something will emerge. But as of now, no.
I mean, there is a very mythical status or stature given to what we call the Vagyekar, the person who writes the poetry and composes it musically also. And I think that's a
No, but Kali, if you think of Jhaji, when he was writing about, let's say, when he was making his Sangeet Ramayan, all those compositions which were beautiful, which were episodes from the Ramayan, but Ram was his isht. He believed in that. He went every day to Gangaji to bathe, and he would come back singing, and that was him, So when he writes those compositions, they reflect a part of his own life, his own lifestyle, his own beliefs. I am not the same, yes, and I am not the same person. So unless I am able to find a voice there, I feel there is so much good literature, and it has been a tradition. I mean, I am not the first person to do this. There are so many musicians who have taken extracts from various poems and verses from the past, and we all sing them as iconic khayal bandishes also.
I mean, coming to that, the next choice that Shubha has made is of Kesarbai's Sura Sangat. It's a composition in Tilakamo. And about this composition, I call it the national anthem of Jaipur Gharana.
Yeah.
Because it was composed by Aladia Khan Sahib himself, and in a very Sanskritized language. And it's a beautiful composition. Even the words are beautiful, but it is so Sanskritized. And it also encapsulates all the achar, जिसे कहते हैं, all the doables in good music. So the composition is Sura Sangata Raga Vidya Jo Kantha Kar Dikhaye.
संगीत प्रमाण
संगीत प्रमाण
जो कंठ कर दिखाए,
जो कंठ कर
वाको जानिए
बुनी. And of course the Antra has more Anudruta Pruta Guru Lagu. And we have it in Kesar Bhai's voice. I'm very touched and happy that you chose Kesar Bhai, but what were your reasons for it?
Well, it's obvious that I listen to a lot of music of my own gurus, but here was Kesar Bhai is, I feel, an iconic singer for many, many reasons. I mean, who am I to say that she's iconic, but really speaking, the majesty and the profound quality of Hindustani classical music is so beautifully expressed in the way, I mean, it was not as if Kesar Bhai could not sing fast tans or faster than what she chose to sing, but the clarity, the adherence to Shastra, and yet the assertion of her own identity decided to retire when she felt the need to retire, and not when people were saying, oh my god, थोड़ा ठीक था, आज थोड़ा सा गड़बड़ था, age हो गई है. None of these remarks, she never permitted any of these remarks about her own singing.
Yeah, she lived a good 10-12 years after she stopped.
Yes, and she was at the pinnacle of her career. I think there is much to learn from a person like Kesar Bhai.
सांस, क्या दम,
क्या क्लैरिटी है, क्या राग की क्लैरिटी, तान तो फिर जबरदस्त है।
बचपन में सुने जाते
अच्छा
3 रुपए जमा करके शांति निकेतन विलंबित कर 2 आवर्तन 3 आवर्तन तान
एक सांस में
एक सांस
वाह।
अद्भुत।
And the other piece you have chosen is of Siddheshwari. And why that?
You know, I mean, I've always been fascinated by Thumri, and her singing of Thumri can rob people of expression. But here is someone whose technique was flawless, and what a large, enormous voice, where it's impossible to camouflage any problems in the voice or any problems in the rendering. There is no camouflage possible, and yet there is such immense expression. There is such an emotive quality, and also that more and more I feel when that we are losing a lot of repertoire of Thumri, because people who are willing, there is of course a large section of music lovers who feel that Thumri is light, it's easy stuff, and they leave the auditorium when Thumri starts. There are also musicians who feel that this is not really classical, this is not something that needs to be studied, and we have heard everybody speak about this very often. But I also feel that a large part of the repertoire of Thumri that we are hearing today is of a certain kind, so the lightness of that repertoire very often is acceptable to certain sections of the audience and to artists as well. Here's a piece which could really have be considered very, very light, and yet there is again such majesty in the rendering that I don't need to say anything more.
Sorry about that.
Siddheshwari again was a major presence in Delhi in our growing up years, and in fact she used to stay in Karol Bagh when I was born. My mother and my aunts were great friends of Savita Devi, and they used to stay very close to our house. And but then for many years I didn't have any sort of contact with her. I grew up, and then when I was in first year college, there used to be a magazine of the Times of India group called the Youth Times, and Anis Jung used to edit it. And so one of my first assignments was to do a story on Siddheshwari. Then around that time, Rita Di organized a landmark musical event in my lifetime at least, where she had all the women singers of India of that time. She called them here and I volunteered. Keshavda and Rita Di, were such mentors to me actually. And it was around 74 or 72.
74. That
70.
was the first time Kishori was ever presented in Delhi.
In Delhi, yes.
Kishori, Parveen, Siddheshwari, Girija Devi,
And
Sikil sisters, all those people, both south and north.
Siddheshwari ji was a larger than life woman, in fact. And I think maybe we can now take questions. Do you have anything more to share?
No, just that I am a keen listener, and these are two tracks. The music of these two artists' really journeys has been part of my journey, but there are many others, of course, and it was a very difficult decision for me to bring just these two tracks.
Well, as you say, Hari Ananta, Hari Katha Ananta. So you can't, this is of course an incomplete conversation in many ways. But when the time knocks on the door of everybody, including us, so we have some time now for brief comments or more welcome, some short questions. Yes, please. And we'll bring the mic to you, just a minute. And please do let us know who you are. Yeah.
Well, I'm in a profession of law, and I love music, and especially I love your music and any music. I just wanted to know from you, who was your role model when you came to classical singing? Your role model. Everybody wants to aspire and have some role model. This is one question. And some other question relating to classical singing is, most of the singers, I find they have their left hand near the ear. And what doesn't that mean? Thank you very much. My name is Jagdish Chandra Batra. I'm a doctor, I'm a barrister, I'm a senior advocate in Supreme Court, I'm a member of IAC, so I have often come to class and listen to music like you. Thank you so much.
Good.
PhD.
खासतौर से सिद्धेश्वरी जी बहुत लगाती थी.
अलग लोग अलग कारण से करते होंगे, लेकिन अपनी आवाज़ अपने कान में सुनाई दे, इसलिए कान कप करके उसमें, क्योंकि जब साज चल रहे हैं तो तानपुरा भी है, सारंगी भी है, तबला भी है, उसके बीच में से उनकी आवाज़ कैसे लगती है, एकदम जिगर पे लगती है. और वो एक्यूरेसी के लिए कई बार लोग कान पे हाथ रखते हैं ताकि अपनी आवाज़ जो है वो और ज़्यादा अच्छी तरह सुनाई दे सके. रोल मॉडल मैं बहुत क्या करूं, उस मामले में भी इक्लेक्टिक हूँ. कई सारे रोल मॉडल्स हैं. जब किसी का गाना सुनती हूँ ना, तो मैं उस वक्त मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि दो रिएक्शंस होते हैं. एक तो ये होता है कि आई फील सो कम्प्लीटली, आई वांट टू हियर मोर ऑफ दैट आर्टिस्ट म्यूजिक, एंड एट टाइम्स आई फील, when especially when I hear the old masters,
I feel, what are we doing? Why have we wasted so much time? We have not reached, this kind of accuracy, this kind of expressive quality. मतलब अपनी कमियां और दिखने नजर आने लगती हैं और सामने खड़ी होके बिल्कुल विशालकाय बन जाती हैं अपने सामने.
Anybody else? Yes, please. Yeah, mic hand.
I just wanted to ask, I was struck by something, the first comment of Kalidas is where he said that, when he began that, I must speak in Hindi also because, Hindustani music can only be spoken of in Hindi. I don't know whether this is some kind of nationalist conceit, because the reason I ask is, what my larger question is that when you write criticism, you translate one form into another, as you assume. And my question to both of you is, why is there such an appalling state of music criticism? What is the reason? We just don't have any good writing on music. There's so little. And you can count a few books and maybe a couple of essays, I think, of Chetan Karnani or Kumar Mukherjee. Why? I'd like to ask both of you, why is this the case?
Kumar Mukherjee was anecdotal. Chetan Karnani was the critic. That I will concede. And I think Chetan Karnani was a very important critic who has not really got his due. Unfortunately, his best book went out of print and it was not republished ever. In fact, what he did was that he expanded it and it somehow lost its, but Chetan Karnani was an important critic. And even Chetan Karnani dealt with this language problem of language, and I don't want to get into Hindi being the national conceit, but the problem is, or rather, for some reason, historically, certain dialects of Hindi got accepted as what we call Geya, this single. And from Maharashtra to Bengal, those compositions have been sung, even if they have been mispronounced and, adopted in various accents. And Hindustani music remained confined to, and perhaps to some extent, a prisoner of those dialects of Hindi, Awadhi and Brajbhasha mostly. And also the taaleem that was given to us was in a mixture of these dialects and Urdu. So the jargon, in fact, when musicians speak amongst themselves, there is a whole lot of jargon we use, which is almost untranslatable. People like some critics who wrote in English tried to find approximations in Western music. To call kampan as tremolo, or to call tan by the various, that has been used is laughable. It's apology.
Mean as grace notes.
Exactly. Mean as grace notes. So there is a problem here, yes, and perhaps that's a problem of modern criticism in India, in fact, I will concede.
But I think Dr. Ranade tried to address several of these issues and wrote
his
prolifically
essay on
in
language and
Marathi
music is very
as
good.
well as English. I think that was one of, I feel that his writing and his discussions on these issues, even the term that we generally use for Vistar in English is improvisation, whereas we know that's not a very accurate description of of Badhat and Vistar. Perhaps elaboration might be a better word to use. But I also think that, there is something lacking in the manner in which we are also taught, particularly in
in universities, etc. So the theory, the theoretical aspect of the syllabus, it never actually looks at analysis and criticism. We are not taught any methods, which any research methodology. So very often when you have PhDs and when you have research papers on
It's
music,
Malar ke prakar.
yes, and no citations are given. So I think here is something that perhaps has to be addressed in the pedagogy as well. And similarly, when we are looking at today, for example, one of the biggest things is archives. Everybody wants to have an archive, but nobody, if I were to say today that I have learned this piece from an archive and I am singing it to you now, will it be accepted? Immediately it will be crossed off. And people will say, "Arey, dekho cassette guru leke bathi hai." So why are we keeping archives then? I think it is necessary to study that material and to be able to make an analysis, and without saying, for example, something that Anish and I do very often with people that we teach is that we ask them to listen to pieces of music and then describe them to us in whatever language they are fluent in or feel comfortable with. And we say we don't want a single adjective. We want facts about the music. And if you were to break down facts, then very often this whole, there will be many myths that will be shattered. I don't know if everybody wants those myths to be shattered. For example, look at three recordings of different artists singing Malkons. Very often, you will have more or less the same swar sangat in the first few minutes. Then where are you going to say that hum to jitni baar baiठte hain, hum naya gaate hain? So, then you will have to address that issue. अरे आप उस घराने के, आप फला घराने के हैं, लेकिन आपने सुर तो वहीं से स्टार्ट किया, बंदिश अलग गा रहे हैं, तो आप कहते हैं आप बंदिश गाते हैं, पर आपकी जितनी रिकॉर्डिंग्स उसमें आप ऐसे स्टार्ट कर रहे हैं. So then there will be too many myths that will be shattered, and nobody likes that.
That's very true. And vis-a-vis learning from archives, for example, even in our generation, and a person like Ajay Chakravarti, he did learn from Munawar Ali Khan sahab, but the access of the ITC archive of Bade Ghulam Ali Khan's recordings was available to him. Budaditya Mukherjee never learned from Vilayat Khan sahab. His father had learned from Inayat Khan sahab, who didn't play like Vilayat Khan. But so there, especially in our generation, there were a lot of musicians who did learn from archives, but passed it off as talim from some other guru or the other. And that was because of this bias that, you had to have a Sina Basina talim, as it were. But also it was very difficult. I remember when I started listening to music, I used to go to Sangeet Natak Academy to listen, and for that we had to take an appointment with the librarian, and the time would be, sort of allotted to you, and it was. Now of course, all that we really learnt or heard with such great difficulty. First we had to hear those compositions and then go back to our gurus and ask them about it. And if they were in a mood or if they knew it, they would share it with you or not share it with you. Today everything is so easily available on the flick of your on the YouTube keyboards that it's really quite fantastic. And I think that informs a person like Ajay Das' daughter, what's his name? Kaushiki, for example. Kaushiki's singing is so evolved, and I'm sure she could not have learned all that from her father. Or maybe he made her access all that music. Because I'm amazed at the kind of things that she throws up once in a while, which is quite beyond whatever Munawar Ali Khan sahab ever sang, And so the archive is insidiously making its way into music making, but never acknowledged.
Well, on this question of lack of music criticism, एक समस्या उत्तर भारत में तो ये है कि उत्तर भारत में जहाँ जहाँ ये घराने थे वहाँ करीब करीब वहाँ से गायब है। अगर ये घराने बचे हों, सब के सब उत्तर भारत में थे, एक आध छोड़ दीजिए भिंडी बाजार घराना, बाकी
वो
सब
भी मुरादाबाद में।
वो भी मुरादाबाद। तो यहीं के घराने थे और इनमें से कोई नहीं बचा, वहां नहीं बचा जहाँ के ये है। जयपुर में जयपुर नहीं है, बनारस में बनारस नहीं बचेगा, लखनऊ में लखनऊ नहीं है, ग्वालियर में ग्वालियर गायब है। तो वो सारा जो प्रश्न है ये एक व्यापक वंचना सा प्रश्न है। दूसरा यह है कि मुझे लगता है कि चूंकि ये घराने हिंदुस्तानी संगीत में महाराष्ट्र और बंगाल में चले गए, इसलिए बांग्ला में और मराठी में इन पर अधिक अच्छा लिखा गया है और कई बार वो अंग्रेजी से ज्यादा अच्छा लिखा गया है। वहां भी सत्यशील देशपांडे वामन देशपांडे इत्यादि ने लिखा है। तो एक दूसरा यह है कि मुकुंद लाट ने एक बहुत दिलचस्प बात कही है कि कहते तो सब हैं कि हम अब तो बुजुर्गों का जो दिया हुआ है वो गा रहे हैं और फिर भी हम नए हैं। तो ये जो विडंबना है, क्योंकि तो हमारे यहाँ स्वीकार्यता के लिए जरूरी है कि आप इसको कहीं ना कहीं से पहले से आया हुआ बताएं। हमको तो बुजुर्गों ने आप नए ढंग से रहे हैं, तो हमारे यहाँ नए को स्वीकार करने में भी पुराने की कुछ न कुछ भनक होनी चाहिए, तभी प्रामाणिक माना जाएगा, ऐसे नहीं माना जाएगा। अब बहरहाल और कोई प्रश्न? So well friends, we come to the end of the evening. We have on the 10th of October a gay memorial lecture being given by a very eminent Gandhian called Kumar Prashant. This will be at India Habitat Center on 10th October, and the theme is Sahitya or Satyagraha. We have a festival, a Raza festival of young classical performers called Uttaradhikar, which will be held in the Stein Auditorium, India Habitat Center, 18th to 20th October, where disciples of Sujata Mahapatra, Malavika Sarkai, Prerna Shimali, Uday Bhavalkar, Bahauddin Dagar, and Satyashil Deshpande will be performing. We have a Gayatonde Memorial Lecture, again in India Habitat Center, on 8th November, to be delivered by Rubina Karode. And we have the next Art Matters on 16th of November, a conversation with Geeta Hariharan, the writer. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, both of you.
Thanks,
and here are some flowers for you.
Thank you.